Hello everybody, today I'm going to talk about making landing gear in Pro Engineer. Landing gear can be pretty difficult to make because it's a very complex part, and in order to make it properly what we're going to want to do is find some pictures of them. So this right here is a really nice picture of the forward landing gear, and you can get an idea of how big it is just by looking at this picture. You can see the guy here pulling this wheel away. But what this shot shows us really well is the hydraulic setup for the landing gear. Now obviously when we make our landing gear, we're not going to make something quite this complex on our first try, but we can get something pretty close. So if we go back to images here, you can get some ideas of what the rear landing gear looks like. And there's a couple different features on the landing gear that we want to pay attention to. Let's see if I can find a good picture to show that. Preferably a forward on shot. There we go. So in this case you can see that there's a hydraulic cylinder right here, and that's what pulls the landing gear in or out of the airplane. We have another bit of landing, a little bit of the cylinder right there. That's also important to pay attention to. So there's 3 or 4 real basic parts. You have the wheelbase down here, the vertical cylinder that takes most of the load, and then you have the actuators that pull the landing gear in or push it out. So when we actually go to find out how to make our landing gear, we want to figure out first, see if we can get a good picture of this, but it doesn't look like there's one there. What we want to do is figure out the distance between these two, so when we go into our airplane we can make pretty good estimations of where these need to be. That's not really critical in order to make them. What's really critical though is to figure out how big these are. I mean, you can see how big this tire is relative to the man there, but we don't know how big that man is and how that would relate to how big the tire is. So do a Google search. You can find a lot of interesting things, and I found this PDF document about the Boeing 777, just about the landing gear. And right here we can find the nose gear tire size, and we have 43 by 17.5 inch radius, and here we go, 52 by 21R. So that right there can give us a very good idea of how big our tires need to be. Alright, so about 17 inches across and about 42 inches that way. Seems about right. That's probably a little over 3 feet there. So that is our basic building block for making the tires and the rest of the landing gear. Because we can see this is about maybe 3 or 4 tire heights off the ground. And that's really all we need. Once we have the tires and all that figured out, the rest of this landing gear really isn't that complicated. We guesstimate. Alright, it's not that bad. So if you open up Pro Engineer, we're going to make a new part here, and we're just going to call this landing gear. Oops. Why did that open up? Yes, we really want to close that. There we go. So here is our datum plane, and what I'm going to do is I'm not going to start off with the actual wheels themselves, but I'm going to start off with what they're mounted to. So I'm going to create a quick extrude here just to get a rough idea of where I want to be. And I'll just make a nice rectangle, and then I'll start editing this. So if we go back to looking at these, these are roughly 40 to 50 inches in diameter, and here's a pretty good shot. So that's pretty far, and they don't have that much distance in between them. So if I'm going from the center of each one of these, a little bit past that to there, that there is maybe about 50 inches, 60 inches, something like that. So I'm going to make the base 120 inches. And I'm going to make the height about, let's make it 10. Seems pretty thick, but we can go back and edit this later. So I'm just going to accept that, and we're going to take another look at how wide that is there. That's probably about a tire width wide. So I'm going to say that that's roughly 60 inches. But if we look right here, the entire block isn't going to be 60 inches wide. It's maybe going to be maybe something along the lines of a foot wide. So I'm going to go ahead and make this 12 inches. That really doesn't look all that structural, but that's about what we want to have. So I'm going to accept that. Now I'm going to go back and edit that just to make sure we have everything set up right. And to make building this very easy, I'm going to have the front datum plane here going through the middle. That way when I go to make the tires, it's a very easy thing to do, because I just move out, make my tires, and then mirror them over. But first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a series of axles. I'm going to start on the front datum plane there, and I'm going to start right from the end here. So I'm going to reference the top, if I can get there. There we go. I'm just going to make a circle. It's tangent there, and we'll go in and edit this. Where are we? There we go. And we're also going to make a tangent to that, if we can get there. There we go. There. That's all I really wanted there. So I'm going to delete the extraneous lines, and there I get my circle. That's going to be my axle. So I'm going to have this going through both sides, and we're going to make this about, let's call it 45 inches. And we're going to accept that. Now we're going to pattern this down along the section here. You don't need to pattern it. If you really want to just make 3 separate extrudes, or all in one extrude, make it happen, then you can probably do that. Let's see how this worked out. That looks pretty good there. This is the basis of our landing gear now. So I'm going to save that so we don't lose this. Be a pain in the neck to have to recreate it. So now I'm going to start on our tires, and what I'm going to do is just make a simple extrude, and I'm going to make them right off of that end point of the axle. And to make my life really easy, I'll get my center point for my circle there. Now I'm going to go out. So we'll call this 45 inches, just to see how this looks initially. And we're going to make that about 15 inches wide, because that's about what it was. I think it was 17.5 in the back there. So right there, that looks pretty good. We're going to accept that. And just like before, we're going to pattern that down with references. And that looks pretty good. There's a little bit more of a gap there, so I'm going to go back and edit my first extrude. I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'll make it, say, 48 inches. See how that compares. Accept. Yeah, that looks pretty decent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the pattern there, and I'm going to put all the bells and whistles onto this one wheel that I want. And for this case, I'm just going to put a little round on either end. Make it a little bigger. Let's say 3 inches. Let's see how that looks. I think it's a little bit bigger. There we go. That looks a little better. So I'm not going to do any like spokes or anything in here, or make your connection to the axle, because this is just a very basic example. If you wanted to go really in depth, you could go ahead and make your wheels look just like this with a little cut in and all the little spokes in there, but that's going to take a lot of time, and depending on your model you might not be able to go into that kind of detail. So now that we have that all set, I'm going to group these. This is going to be our tire, and if I just want, I grouped them to make patterning a lot easier, so we can go ahead and pattern that. Or, let's see, since now it's patterned to a reference, we can't necessarily make the mirror image on the other side. So we could try to fiddle around and make it mirrored, but there's another way we can do this very easily. Just going to make the same exact thing over here. So just quick use of the use tool, get my same dimensions, and these were 17.5, and quick round, 4.5 inches, and we'll group that and pattern it. So let's see, why did that not pattern? Edit definition, direction. Make this work right. 3 and 55-inch difference, and we're going to flip the direction and accept, and there we go. There's the basis for our landing gear. Now this right here looks a little bit too wide to me. If we go back to our pictures, you can see that, might be a tad wide, might be about right, but we can come back and work on that later. What I am going to do, however, is make this centerpiece a little bit wider to make the cylinder a little bit easier to make. So we're going to make this, let's call it 18 inches. Okay. So from here, the next big thing that we need to make is the cylinder going up. So if we take a look at some pictures of that, we have the cylinders there, but let's see where it actually connects. And it looks like it connects pretty much right at the center. Now one thing we want to make sure is if we want to have a really high detail model, we'd have a hinge right here. You can see a couple pictures of them taking off where the wheels, like right here, the wheels are at an angle. Now we don't necessarily need to make them at an angle if we're just going to have them, this plane sitting on the ground for a static model. So we'll just make it look like this. So we won't do a hinge, we'll just do a vertical cylinder coming out of there. So you have a couple different options. You can either just do an extrude straight up, or you could do a revolve. With all the bells and whistles on these cylinders, I'd be more inclined to do a revolve. It would make it much easier to make the bottom part of the cylinder that you'd find shiny, and then all the connection points up here where the cylinder becomes much wider. So we're going to use this right datum plane to make a revolve. And we're going to go right off of the middle. So we're going to go make this right here reference if we can. If not, then we're just going to have to fabricate a reference. So we are going to find the midpoint there and there. Delete. Delete. There we go, that's our center line right there. So now we want to figure out how high to make this. Now, as we saw in this picture right here, that looks pretty high. So that's maybe, compared to the mouse there, that's maybe 1.5 mouses. So that's 1, 2, 3, probably 4, maybe 4.5 mouse high. So that right there is about 3 tire heights above there. So if that was 48 inches, we're going to have 3 times 48 inches above that, plus how much height there is between the top of the axle there and there. So that's a little bit of math that you got to figure out. So we have 48 times 3 plus half of 48, which is 24. And then we're going to subtract the height there, which was about 5. So that looks really, really tall. But that's about what we want to have, because this is going right to the center there. And also, if you look at the picture here, this goes way up into the wing here. It's going to hinge somewhere around in here. So there's a little bit unseen here, which you might not have thought of before. So we're going to go and make a very, very simple cylinder here. There we go. Now this little niche in is to represent the shiny part of the cylinder going inside of the larger part up here. So let's take a look. That looks really, really thick. So we got to make that smaller. So what we're going to do is we're going to change this to, let's make this 12 inches. And this up here we'll make 15 inches. Let's see how this looks. That looks a little bit better. So we'll accept that. Alright, next we have the supports going to these. And we're going to work with the ones that are in plane with the wheels right now. So what I mean by that is the ones that would connect from the cylinder here to this base right here. So if we take a look at some of these pictures, this is a pretty good shot right here. We see that we have a cylinder coming straight down, and we have one that's bent over here. So this could be pretty complicated to make. It really depends on how much detail you want to put into this. And for this model, I'm not going to put a whole lot of detail in. I'm going to call this, let's say, 130, make it a little smaller. Here we go. So just looking at this, what I want to do is I want to make a couple of hinge points on this major cylinder here. So I'm going to go into a extrude, and I'm going to go off of the datum plane, the right datum plane, and I'm going to sketch. So the first thing I want to make here is a little box coming out. Get a reference off of that. Now the reason why I'm going from the center out is because when you actually go and make this, you don't want to have the extrude edges peeking out of the side where you wouldn't normally see them. So this just makes it a little bit easier. Alright, so we're going to cut that, and that, and that, and that. So there's just a really simple connection right there. I'm not putting a whole lot of detail into this like you might want to put in. And we'll make this 12 inches to get it out a little bit farther. Now we're going to basically make the same exact thing on the other side, just a little bit lower. So we're going to take a little peek at these dimensions here. And we see that's 7.65. Let's just call that 7.5. Make everything a little bit easier. And we're going to make this dimension right here 4.5. So we have 7.5 right there. And then we're going to come out 12. Come down 7.5. Make our two circles. First one there, second one like that. Oops, Control Z. Don't want to delete our inner circle. And there we go. So we're going to go ahead and accept that and make these passing through the center. And we're going to make them, let's call them 6 inches wide. Let's see how that looks. It's a little bit thin, but that's okay. Let's make it 8. That looks even better. So we're going to accept that. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make the cylinder going down this way. Now, the first thing we want to do is we could make a connection point right there. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to sketch. We're going to change the view just so we can see inside of there, make it easier. So first things first, we're going to come up. Let's say we're going to come out 4 inches on that. We're going to go over 7.5. And then we're going to come back down. Just like that, we are flush there. So we can go ahead and make our circles. And this right here is 4.5. And we're going to accept that and apply the same things there. This is going to be 8 wide. So there we go, now we have our connection there. So what we need to do now is make a cylinder going in between the two of those. That can be kind of tricky, but we have a very easy way to do that. We're going to go placement define for a valve. And what we have is we have A10 right here and A8 right here. Those are the center points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the circles here. And that's going to make those the centers of these circles referenced. And I'm just going to make a line going between them. There we go. There's a line between them. So that's the basis for our cylinders now. So I'm going to come and just make a real simple cylinder coming out of there. There we go. And I'm going to make our center line axis like that and accept that. Now obviously I'm not really paying attention to this, but you might want to make it similar to this where you'd have a little jog in, little cut in like this, and you would also want to have another cylinder going through there, making a little nub on the outside. For this one I'll do it just a little example to show you, but for the rest of them you need to make them yourselves. I'm not going to do it just for the speed of this. So first things first, make a little cut in, and we're going to shrink this a little bit. I'm going to make that 90 degrees so it's perpendicular, and we're going to make this a little bit bigger, let's say 5 inches. See if we can make it like that. We can't. So we'll just go tangent from there out. There we go. And cut away that, cut away that. There's our cylinder there. So before I put the nubs in there, I'm going to put the nubs in all in one step. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to this extrude where I made that adjustment right there, and I'm going to make another one over here in the middle. If you go back to look at this picture, you have a connection coming in fairly close. It's actually a little closer than I thought it was originally. So we're going to come in right next to the base there. And what these two things do is make it possible to move the landing gear around to position it right for your landing. So we're going to edit definition, placement edit on this datum plane, sketch. I'm going to go back to a wireframe view to get a close-up view. And we came up, let's take a look at our dimensions. I believe we came about 4 inches, so let's make that 4. And we went over 7.5 and down. This was 4.5 on the inside. A lot of these dimensions you're just going to have to remember. It makes it easier in the long run. Say, oh yeah, that tire width is 48 inches, so I'll just remember that. And make this 8 wide, going from the center. So already this is shaping up to look pretty decent. And now if you looked at this section right here, these are a little flatter. It makes it a little bit more difficult to make, but I'm just going to make a low resolution shot of this. So again, we're going to go back to this front datum plane and make that definition. And we're going to sketch go back to wireframe so we can see where we're trying to go. And just like when I made the cylinder, I'm going to select Control Z, okay. Control Z, there we go. I'm going to select the where we're trying to go to get a reference point. If you don't have those reference points, it can get kind of hard to actually select that point there. What I'm going to do is just make a rough sketch of where I want this to go. This will cooperate with me. Alright, something like that. Now we can move this point around however we want to. So that's going to be our basic outlook there. We're going to go out on either side. And something like this. Now you don't have to make your landing gear exactly like this. In fact, I'd encourage you not to. But use this as a guide when you go ahead and make landing gear. They're pretty complicated structures, and the more detail you put into them, the better they look. That's sort of a no-brainer, but you want to make it look as good as you can. So right here, what I'm just doing is making an end point. Oops. Alright, that's not liking me, so I'll go ahead and use the use tool. And we're going to want to make this a little bit different. We're going to make this 6 inches wide, going from the center. And get rid of some of these really sharp edges there. Oops. Now obviously this isn't how it's actually going to work out, but you can get the general idea from this. And now for this next to last step, I'm going to make the little nubs coming off of there. So we're going to make one last extrude, placement define, off of this center datum plane there. I'm going to go into wireframe, and I'm just going to go and select every single one of these holes right there. Say OK. And I'm going to make this 10 inches wide going through the center. Now the reason I made it 10 inches wide was so that you could see it coming out of both sides. And so it looks like it's sort of a pin going through the seam there. Alright, so that's the first part of our landing gear, and everything that was in line with the direction of motion there. The next part we want to deal with is the piston that pulls this up into the airframe. So if we go back and look at some of our photos here, we don't actually see what this is connected to inside. So if you're making your airplane and you just cut out a little box here to insert the landing gear into, as long as this end goes far enough into the airplane so that it disappears, it's not going to look strange at all. So we're not going to worry about the end connection up here. What we're going to worry about is this connection right here. So we go back and we want to take a look at which way is going forward and which way is going back. So let's see if we can figure this out from here. And this shot's a little bit too close in to get a good idea of what it looks like. So we'll zoom out to some of these pictures, and you can see that little right angle there on the back. So that little section right there is going to be on the back. Let's see if we can find a larger size. There we go. This is a little better. So the piston goes forward, as you can see right there, and that's what we want to have. So we'll go back to our model, and we're going to set that up so that this is going to be on the inside, and we're going to make this landing gear right here the one on the right side of the airplane. So that means that our support is going to go off to the left here. Now if you want to be making both landing gear, I'm going to show you how to make this for a mirrored part, and it'll just make a reverse copy of it so that you'll have one originally with it off to the left, and then your second copy is going to be off to the right here. So we're going to start with going off to the left. We are going to select a new datum plane. We're going to have it go through this axis right here, and we're going to make it parallel to the front datum plane right there. That is our datum plane reference for everything that's going to go off over here. So we're going to go and start off with a connection between the large cylinder here and where we want to go. Sketch, there we go. So we're going to have a connection, and we're going to try to figure out where that connection actually goes. So let's take a look at the photos that we have. That goes pretty darn low, almost to the base. So we're going to have it go almost all the way down here. And we're going to make this connection much wider than these because this is supporting a fairly decent load. So we're going to come out from the center like before, and we'll make this 12 inches wide and 12 inches out. I'll make this 6 on the interior. Now one thing I want you to note is that all these dimensions that I'm making here are really only based off of the tire. The tires, if you can find the tire dimension or the height dimension, you can get a lot of guesstimation done with this. So we'll make this a little bit wider at 10 inches. Let's see how that looks. It looks pretty good. So now we're going to make our cylinder going up. It's going to be nice and easy. Placement define. And we're going to get our reference right here. That'll work. There we go. I'm just going to drag this point up and to an angle there. So this angle right here, we want to take a little look there. And let's see, we could call that maybe in between 40 and 60 degrees. So why don't we go with something in the middle, 50 degrees. So we'll call that 130. That looks a little bit low. Let's call this 140. That looks a little better. So we're going to go ahead and make our center line right along there. And then we'll come back and go perpendicular up there, all the way down to about here. Take a little zigzag in. And the reason why I'm fiddling around right there, I'm looking for the tangent symbol that's right next to my mouse now. And I'm going to keep coming down, and I'm going to go past the center point right here. And I'm just going to make a quick perpendicular connection out, delete the extra stuff there, and take a look at what I have. Now that looks a little bit too wide. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to narrow that down. Just going to edit the sketch. And let's take a look at these dimensions. So let's make this dimension 8. And this dimension up here, we'll make this 12. Take a look now. That looks a little bit better. Let's see how this looks in real life. We could even go a little bit smaller. So again, we'll go and edit the definition. And we'll make this 10. And let's make this right here. Let's make this 7. And accept that. So that looks fairly decent right there. And you can go back and change the angle of this anytime you want. So if we go back, edit definition, edit this, you can see this angle right here. If that angle turned out to be wrong, then we'd change it to 135. Well, now everything, because it's referenced off of this initial line, can change. So we can edit that angle whenever we need to. And one last little bit. I'm going to make a little extrude going through there, just to hide that sort of ugly inside. So there you go. That is one side of your landing gear. So we're going to save that before we lose it. Let's see if I can find this mirror part that we're going to need. Right here. So if you go under File, Mirror Part, if you click on that, now it's going to say we're going to make a mirror of everything that we have here. And we're going to rename this. So landing gear, and since this originally is for the right side of the airplane, we're going to call it new landing gear left for the left side of the airplane. We're going to say OK. And here it is for our left side of the airplane. And you can see we have this model right here. Oops. And then we're going to go to our right model right there. So now you know how to make a very basic looking landing gear and how to mirror the part, so you don't have to recreate your landing gear in a separate part and spend a lot of time with that. One thing I would recommend doing is going ahead and carving out the insides here and putting all the little spokes. It's a lot of extra detail that looks nice. Another thing, pay attention to how wide these are right here. Because that'll make a big impact on how nice it looks. So I hope this was very useful for you, and if you have any questions, go ahead and put a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them.